There you are. Thank God. Oh, okay. We got to tell you all about The Measure of a Man, and you're here now. So
where have you been?
Yeah,
we were looking all over for you. Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Can you see us?
Hello. Wave at us when we wave at you.
They're waving now. Hello.
Oh, good. Hey, Jake.
Yeah, Becca.
Why'd you guys laugh when I just hit record?
I think we were just kind of in a giggle fit.
I see.
And there was quite a bit of a pause after you're like, and we're live.
Okay, I get the joke now. Becca's stupid. That's the joke.
Not at all.
Becca's so dumb. I'll never have
while we're just in
consciousness.
video land and not in podcast land yet, go watch the new season of Discovery. It is very, very good.
Did they pay you for the sponsorship?
They did not.
Did it just come out?
Free will. It is.
I guess they owe you a part.
Airing on CBS All
that's
Access.
season 3, right?
Season 3.
A friend of mine was just texting me the other day asking me if I'd watched Picard, and I said I hadn't seen any of the new stuff. And I'm like on the fence about watching it because I kind of want to like relive going through TNG without remembering all of the continuity of it that I know gets referenced in later like Picard and stuff like that. Yeah.
I'm going to be going into a little bit of Picard because this episode I'll go into it on the podcast, but I recommend all of it. All of New Trek is great, and anyone who disagrees is just sour. And
anyone who disagrees is just sour.
No, my mom said that Picard is a little too old for them to have done the reboot.
Whatever.
Oh, wow.
Okay, fighting words for my mom.
It's great. I love having new content and new Star Trek content, and this is a great time to be a fan.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Well, and I believe they mention actually even one of the characters comes back in this, right? Isn't Maddox referenced in Picard?
We'll get into that.
Well,
how does an episode start?
This is a classic episode, The Measure of a Man. It is one of the most highly regarded episodes, I think, of TNG. It's the episode where Picard must prove Data is a sentient being with rights and freedoms under Federation law.
Stop.
You're already getting teary-eyed just with the synopsis?
Yeah. I didn't actually like cry. I just loudly wept, you know?
I definitely had a few moments of like, oh, yeah.
I ugly cried.
Oh, really?
Ugly. I was in a mood.
I think I'm not in a mood. I think I'm in a super focused mood, but I did like have audibles that were like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, did it start out with more of a turned on noise from you? Because we got an O'Brien scene at the very beginning.
Oh, he did.
He got quite a cunning line, I might say. He opens up with, "Time to pluck a pigeon." When they find out that Data is inexperienced at poker and only knows the rules, by having read them.
So that means like roast a noob.
Right.
Roast a noob. Yeah,
exactly.
The more common colloquialism.
Yeah. But I think this is the first time that we've seen the poker table, right?
This is our first poker scene.
I've never seen one before.
This will become an ongoing thing for Next Gen.
Well, you would think.
Around the poker table.
This is how men bond.
I guess.
Yeah, and we get to learn a little. Actually, did we not see Riker bluff earlier in something, or am I making that up?
That sounds right, but it all gets jumbled up.
Yeah, same. It gets jumbled for me too. But yes, this is, I believe, the first poker trope that we see because, as Xander mentions, we do see it more with other characters, specifically Riker and, like, I think Worf and definitely Data too, because Data gets better at poker.
I just like to say that throughout the recording of this episode, I will be maintaining a poker face from now on. What's known as a poker face.
Good luck.
For the people that are on Patreon video, let's see it right now.
And start. Go ahead.
Okay, you lasted 4 seconds. What made you break was
I'm so bad at Among Us.
But the thing is in Among Us you can't like see. That's what about Among Us really trips me up. Is like I'm so used to like visual deduction. Yeah.
For my mom who doesn't know, Among Us is a video game that New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made famous when she streamed it on Twitch last week. But it's basically like werewolf or mafia or any sort of social deduction, but you're also moving around a video game. If you're a good guy, you're doing tasks. If you're a bad guy, an imposter, you're murdering your fellow crewmates on this ship. And I play a lot of it. And thank God you can't see my face, Jake, because most of the time I'm going... My mouth was wide open and I was flinging my hands about wildly. It's not me. I don't know.
Every time I'm an imposter, I feel like I murder someone. Then another person walks in the room and I'm just like, well, I'm fucked.
Say they did it.
Well, I'm not great at Among Us, and I'm not great at poker either. In fact, I'm notoriously bad at poker. But I wanted to talk about, too, the ending of that scene, because was the joke that Pulaski could, like, school all of them? That she knew what
did she say? Doing? The axe man, the man with the axe takes all?
I have no idea what any of that means.
I think that...
She's so good at poker!
Oh, now do you respect Rebecca?
Right?
No.
She's amazing.
I think that's a made-up thing. Okay. But it's made up to the point to where you still get it, which is that she's a hidden pro. She's a shark. Right?
She almost had my respect for half a second, but a real shark would wait until they won a hand.
Yeah, no, she wouldn't do it after the first hand. That's so true.
Yeah,
she sets the trap, she sets the trap after like having folded. She folded the first hand.
I fold. Gotcha.
I fold. Also, I'm really good at it. So yeah, we have an interesting little poker scene. Data's wearing a visor, which it looks like kind of like a half a dinner plate right now, but he eventually wears a poker visor, like an actual green one, like you would see later on. But so we learn that Data wants to like understand human interaction, and this is also setting our scene for Data parsing information in two different ways, whether it's the literal definition of how to play poker, and then it's the social definition of how to play poker, which he learns in this first scene.
I also had the thought of this was a pretty long cold open, because we had not only this poker scene, but then we cut away to another scene before we see the opening, so it's still the cold opening.
Another weird teaser break where Picard is on board the starbase that they just went to, and he recognizes this woman across the lounge, and he goes up and talks to her. Her name is Philippa Laveau. And
who is an extremely short actress that they framed in such a way so you wouldn't think that she was short for some reason.
That's a really interesting point,
They
Becca.
shot up their noses because when he was on the stairs and she was at the top of the stairs, they were the same height. And then they like tried to hide it. She's short. We get it. It's fine.
I don't think most people would notice that, though. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, because I didn't really notice that.
Yeah, like
I think
you're
she
right.
was under 5 foot. She was extremely short.
Wow. Shooting low, shooting from the low angle also kind of gives them a little bit more stature as well, and gives them a little bit more power. And that shot definitely did with the Enterprise kind of hovering in the background too. But that trailer ended with
lighting, that glowy backlight.
There was a lot of that.
Real.
Yeah. And that scene that teaser pretty much ended with like him having said, "I'd rather like have busted a chair across your teeth," or something like that.
Well, I think what you're forgetting is that Philippa Laveau prosecuted him in the Stargazer court-martial. And I went back just to recap for myself the Stargazer episode, and that was where we first learned of the Picard maneuver, which is when Picard ordered a jump to high warp, so the Ferengis thought for a second that there were two ships and they didn't know which one to fire on. Do you fire on where they left in warp or where they're coming into warp? They fired on where they left. Those stupid idiots. Now the Picard maneuver would work because it's popular and everyone knows shoot at the new one appearing. But at the time, these Ferengis had no idea, and he was able to destroy the Ferengi vessel, but it also destroyed his ship, the Stargazer. And it seems like she didn't go easy on him.
You are amazing and incredible, and I am constantly impressed by you.
They did my focus pill today.
The Star Trek fandom is so lucky to have you in it.
Wow. Okay. That was a really big compliment.
Yeah. No, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, on all fronts.
Stop.
And so Picard and her, Philippa, have a kind of icy...
And Picard, you mean that pompous ass who's a damn sexy man?
Yeah, damn sexy. They have this kind of doesn't quite work flirtatious adversary relationship where the flirting feels kind of forced, but the adversarial nature also feels kind of forced. So it doesn't quite work in terms of their magnetism. But that said, we get the point, which is that they don't really like each other, but they still respect each other. And we go on board the Enterprise along with this new guy, Bruce Maddox.
Yes. Well, also we got to see a cool Admiral uniform.
Oh yeah, the Admiral. Yeah. Okay. So I really appreciate, Xander, how you keep pointing out different wardrobe options, because I do forget to highlight. I know, and I don't always appreciate that as much, but I do as soon as you bring it up. So do you want to talk anything about the Admirals?
Yeah, this Admiral uniform was, I don't think anything we've seen before, but it was a cool sort of cross-section of the TNG uniform with the gold sort of lame embalming, I guess, around the edges. Embroidery. Piping. Yeah.
Anybody that messes with Data is on my shit list for life. Right. I don't care if you come around. Doesn't matter to me.
Well, what if it's justified that you have to come at Data? Right? What if you're duty
Good poker
bound?
Face, Becca.
Because someone implanted their brain into his data?
No, because if you don't, then they're inherently guilty. You're coming up the Riker conundrum.
Oh, the Riker maneuver number 2.
Yeah.
The Riker Gambit.
Oh, God, what a precarious position. But before we get to that, we got to set up.
Yeah, let's explain
why
this.
Riker has to make this difficult decision.
Bruce Maddox is a science officer, denoted by his blue uniform.
Yeah, right. You call that science? You'll never be Dr. Soong.
Wow. That's true.
Well, we'll find. So he comes on board the bridge on a tour with the Admiral and the captain, and immediately Data and him lock eyes because Data recognizes him. And it turns out that Data knew this guy from when he was in his Starfleet entrance exam application status. I can't remember. Job interview? What is the word?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, all of those were correct.
He was the only person on the panel to say to reject his application.
I think he was the outspoken. It's as if he wrote the dissenting brief. I think there was 2 factions, and he was the head of that faction.
There you go. And apparently on the grounds that Data wasn't necessarily a person, right? So though we have...
Bullshit!
In previous
my poker face for 3 seconds.
Well, I can't remember. Becca, maybe you can tell me this. In previous episodes, haven't we outlined that he is a person under Federation law somewhere? I thought somebody said something about that in early episodes.
Ooh, well, maybe he was, but it wasn't established as a law for all androids.
Right.
I think
it wasn't considered precedent yet. Which we deal with a lot of legal matters in this
You're getting so legal. I love this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same as a matter of like the legal bubble that they're in, because first you have to convince like the captain of the Enterprise that this is a person. Okay, he's definitely convinced. Now it's the Enterprise as a ship. Now it's moving further and further out to like the Federation. Okay, this needs to be law. This is something that everybody needs to recognize that not everybody does. Everyone's used to talking to a computer or talking like to their toaster or their replicator.
Don't say toaster in my presence. Well, we haven't really got to the point, which is this episode turns into a courtroom about whether or not Data has the rights of a human. And we'll talk about the ways that we get there. But what was my point?
Well,
you walked into that with such confidence.
Yeah, I had a thing.
I was going to bring up, you talked about Bruce Maddox. Later on, Bruce Maddox becomes essential to Picard, the newer season that has been released with Patrick Stewart reprising his role. So this essentially is like, you could say, a first episode of Picard, because the things that happen here set off a big chain of events that we revisit later.
That's really cool.
Awesome. This is, I'd say, the most important episode we've seen. I remember my thing. Xander, you brought up an interesting argument that would have been great in the court case later, which is you could define his consciousness because of the way that other people believe he's conscious.
Right.
That's what my issue was with this episode, which I love this episode. This episode, I think, is probably like the best written one we've seen yet. I'm not sure it's my favorite yet, but it's definitely like the best composed. And I was wondering, why didn't we have more witnesses? Like, wouldn't Geordi be a great person to have on here who's like, I don't know, his best friend? Or like obviously Tasha was a great example that they bring up during the scene, but it's like, why not have the crew of the Enterprise? Even Pulaski might be on the Riker side in this a little bit too, which would be an interesting like dichotomy to have the crew all involved in this in some way.
Yeah, I think it could have turned into a much longer thing. Sorry, I wrote a lot about this because I thought it was really interesting that without the budget limitations, this could have been a huge scene. I would have loved to have seen this on the Starbase with hundreds of people present, because this is like a huge Supreme Court ruling or the equivalent, where she's creating this precedent. And it's weird that she's just one voice, one judge gets to decide instead of a jury or instead of like a panel.
So
that's all budget of the actors that they could afford that day.
What were you going to say, Xander? Sorry, before I go.
Oh, just along the same thing of like, it might have just been a technical thing of this set was available for this many actors and it felt too crowded, you know.
I wonder also, like,
this Marriott conference room.
Well, story-wise, they made it because they're at a distant starbase and she's the only JAG representative there, right? So that she doesn't even have like lawyers or anything. So that's why she had to recruit these officers, Picard and Riker.
What does JAG stand for?
Judge Advocate General, which I learned from the NBC show JAG in the 90s. Highly recommend. And like, it's funny you guys mentioned the set. Do you guys recognize it?
No.
It's the Battle Bridge. It's a redress of the Battle Bridge.
Oh, dang.
You can kind of see, like, because where Bruce is where the behind him is where the main view screen is. And you see those, like, consoles up top, like, over there.
Sure.
Those are definitely, like, the consoles where people would be working if they were on the Battle Bridge.
Yeah, I had made a note. We're on a starbase, so it was cool to see another, like, vessel in a way.
Yeah.
This is where when you do that fancy maneuver of separating the ship in two.
Yeah. But with this, I think, too, there had to be a way to shoehorn this to not be a big Supreme Court ruling thing, because that would have been impossible and outside the scope of where they were going. So I think it was really clever of them to sort of, okay, we need it not to be on the Enterprise because it needs to be an enemy that's not among us, but we want to feature the actors that we have. So let's make Among Us. Riker is sus. So let's make Riker be the one that has to like fulfill his duty, because I think that's creating conflict and makes it more interesting.
Yeah,
that's a very good point.
Of anybody available, then they could just pull in people and whatever. So I think
that's true.
The structure of these limitations makes it believable that this argument and case could have happened in this way. Otherwise, you're right. It's unbelievable that something like this would be decided in this way.
Well, let's dismantle order of scenes so we can get to how Riker had to make this decision. You see what I did there? Because Bruce Maddox thinks that he can just dismantle Data, and he barges in here and he says, "Give me your android."
I really like it when you dissect your jokes and just take it apart. And
you're welcome.
Look at the core issues.
So after like Maddox declares his intentions and there's some confusion about like what Data's orders are and how he can resist, Data decides to resign. So he starts packing up his stuff, and there's a really great scene in Data's quarters with Maddox where he marches in without asking, because it's not a person to him, and he just starts reading through his stuff. And Data calls him out. It's like, isn't it customary to do this? And I think Maddox even just ignores him, but they have a really great discussion just about like how Data fathoms things. And I like that word, fathom, because Data can take in information, but what Maddox doesn't understand is how he processes it, and how if he understands like subtext or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I love
his fear. Oh, sorry.
No, yeah.
His Data's fear that sure, you can download all of the data bytes of my brain into a computer, but I'm not sure that it will be able to interpret the flavor of the information that I've given it, the things I've learned about games of chance, the things I've learned from my interactions and how I process those. I don't know if that can be stored in a data bit. And isn't that flavor in between the information the definition of consciousness?
One of the things that's interesting, too, is that this is one of the first times that we're exploring the concept of memory in the Star Trek universe, because later on, they do more explorations of like, okay, experience and memory create something called a memory engram, and that something can be modified or replaced or switched around or something like that. So this is sort of the beginnings of that. Like, what is memory and experience, and how far does actually living it go? It's the same as the transporter argument. Like, is the molecule reassembling in the same way when you transport, or is it a different being?
Then again, if we believe in the transportation technology recreating data exactly, then we should believe that it can.
Whose side are you on,
has
Becca?
already built another data over and over again.
I mean, yeah, that's the problem with like living in this high concept sci-fi is like we can easily contradict ourselves with some of the technology we've created.
But
so
even if the transporter technology can recreate a data, it doesn't mean that humanity can, in the same way that our AI perpetuates taking up all of our attention span and creating new ways to, spread disinformation, among other things, but keep us interacting with it. The people who originally created those lines of code can't necessarily control the code anymore.
Right. Or how it's used. Mm-hmm. But who can control his own code is Netflix. But who can control his own code is Data. And and we have a little goodbye party for Data. He unwraps the gift just like my father does.
Just like my dad.
Yeah, to save the wrapping paper.
You have to save the paper and put it in a box.
He makes the exact same point, which is you can reuse it.
Yep.
Right.
We have a size rule. If it's above a certain size, you have to save the paper. If it's below, you get to rip.
Wow.
Yeah.
And does your father actually reuse it? Because my parents have before too.
Yes, actually, last Christmas, I only used recycled paper because I was thinking about, I read some statistic about how many rolls of wrapping paper and how many trees that takes and the plastic involved that we go through every year and just throw it away. So I'm all recycled paper from now on, baby.
Yeah, the wrapper tree orchards are like super low right now.
In Animal Crossing.
And in that scene, we also do get like a glimpse of Geordi, and he does mention how sad he is about his friend leaving. And again, I really wish this could have come into the trial a little bit, but it does. It still serves the purpose of showing us Data's connections socially on the ship.
And I also wanted to point out as well, and Dr. Pulaski was introduced as a character who also viewed Data as a machine, Data, however you want to say it.
Ew, don't.
And has since grown. A poker game, a going away party for his retirement. Pulaski was there at both of those events. Aww. She cares. She's his friend now, and she would fight for him.
She did say, I would totally be on the other side of this argument at one point when she was questioned.
Did she?
But
she did.
But that's the thing, is that's what makes it interesting.
That's the cognitive dissonance she's experiencing.
Well, I mean, we also, from a writing standpoint, we don't want to make her the villain. That's why Maddox is here, right? Is like she can't be fully antagonistic to Data's existence as an individual. So we get Maddox, who I think plays a great villain. I know Becca, you hate him, which I think it shows how good of a job he did.
He's doing a great job.
Yeah. They do a good job with some of these. Like, I think the villains I've most detested are Starfleet officers who are like cramping the style of the Enterprise, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's becomes known as like the admirals are the bad guys, like in a lot of Star Trek.
Speaking of another bad guy that we're supposed to like, and I don't, Philippa.
Yeah,
she's like, look, if we want to go against this, we need a case, and we're gonna have a court hearing. And if you don't want one, I'm gonna say Data's a toaster, and that's why I got very upset when you said the toaster thing earlier.
Yeah. What a weird anachronism to use too.
Right? They don't have toasters anymore. Data's a replicator.
That's what you take issue with?
Yeah.
Very good point. I will say Data is a replicator is a way better comeback.
It would have
time period.
I mean, it's like the equivalent of us saying Data is a watermill. It's like not the same amount of technology.
Along the same lines, she keeps referencing someone buying someone dinner, and money in the Federation is
that's so
concept too. But
she's a history
it's the
buff.
Sentiment of it. It's
I think it was a joke. Are you buying?
Like, scrawl me a quill pen letter, darling.
You up?
In longhand, yes.
Yeah.
So this is when she makes the proclamation that the only way that they can go against So we didn't talk about the order of operations. So what happened was Data was told he has to get dissected. He said, no, I'm an individual. I will not do it. They said, cool, then you're going to be transferred over to a different ship or the starbase itself so that Picard can't say what I can do to you. And then I can dissect you. And then Philippa is the one that comes up with the idea. Oh, you did say this, that he will resign. And then they declare him the property of Starfleet, which is so messed up. And then Riker has to defend the other side because he's the next highest ranking officer. And in order to do his research, he pulls up a schematic of Data, and it looks like a clip art of a Halloween skeleton.
It looks like a clip art of like a toy figure because the head is way too big for his body.
Yeah, it was like a game of Operation, but on easy mode.
Yes.
Here's what I will say about that scene, though, is that is a really well written scene because I don't think Riker has any lines in it. And Star Trek lately. Did we lose Xander?
No.
Did I lose both of you?
No.
Okay, good. Sorry, my video hiccuped. Okay, cool. That's a really great.
Momentarily blind.
That's a really great scene in terms of the writing because Riker has no lines, and in the Star Trek that we've been watching lately, I feel like they've over-explained a lot of the plot devices and the thoughts about what's happening, and he does a great job showing us rather than telling us, which is he pulls up the schematics, he looks. He sees something that might help him win his case, and he kind of has like a look of not jubilation, but like satisfaction. Yeah, thank you. And then you see Riker realize what this means for Data because he's working against Data, and you see the remorse and melancholy on his face. And season 1, they would have we would have had either him talking to himself or have him like surmising with the computer what's going to happen. It's like
or explaining to Wesley.
Yeah. But now this was just like a 15-second scene that got it all in there, and it actually was an emotional journey too. Like that was really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, and Frakes has really brought a lot of that. He's
very much
doing a fantastic job. Frakes. And he was a good actor from episode 1, but he's becoming a great actor.
Yeah, I think Frakes
Frakes
does a great job with presence overall.
Yeah, and he does a good job of conveying that both in front of and behind the camera. Jonathan Frakes becomes a great director of, among other things, but later on Star Trek. And you can really see him honing his craft here that he brings to the table in the future.
Yeah, it all starts with having a good poker face.
Yeah. Just to fast forward into the future too, like the Star Trek movies that come out that are based on the next generation, they're all some of them are good, others are not, but like the best one in my opinion is First Contact, which is directed by Jonathan Frakes.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
So good.
Instead of saying fast forward, can you just refer to it as warping into the future?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
So we eventually get to the trial, and this is like happens in Act 4, which I think Becca lends to what you were saying, which is I could have watched the trial for like the majority of this episode, but it takes us till 2/3 till we even start it. But we do a good job of like setting up the context of why we are at this trial and a little bit of Data's backstory, because we got to see when he was putting his stuff away, we got to see the Tasha Yar hologram, which I thought was a great callback and really does speak to his, I want to say humanity, but humanities might not maybe the best word, his sentience.
Vulnerability.
Yeah, vulnerability.
No, sorry, I said boneability.
Oh, that too.
But thank you for assuming that I said a real word.
For both of these things, of what you had mentioned before, of Riker finding the off switch, which Dr. Crusher had found in season 1, but it had been a secret between them, and now the reference to Tasha Yar.
That's what he found.
That's what he found.
What do you think it was?
I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
I forgot.
It was more like, I was going to say, this is rewarding the fans who are paying attention and keeping track of the ongoing story. So it's not just like monster situation of the week, but this is rewarding people who have been there from season 1.
Yeah.
I remember, of course, the time it was when we met Lore that we first found his off switch. And I thought that maybe his friends knew about it from that scenario. But no one except
Crusher.
Crusher. May they bring her back soon.
It just tag that onto her name.
She's just having a terrible time at Starfleet Academy right now. Like, just her and her staff are not getting along, right?
Her teenage son has no parental figure.
She's at the Daystrom Institute, and she sent Maddox away. She can't deal with her shit anymore.
Little did she know what she set up. So Picard, the trial begins, and when they introduce Data to the stand, Riker tries to breeze past his accommodations, and Picard wisely says, I want them red, which is a really great tactic because we get to see that Data has received accommodations, right? He's done something as an individual, which I think is one of the few plot holes in this story, which is that when we declare him property earlier on, that kind of goes against the whole fact that he's wearing a uniform and has a rank and got through the academy. I don't understand quite that justification, but they kind of need to breeze through it to get to the trial.
Right. Well, that was just one order because Bruce Maddox said, actually, I got some judge somewhere who was elected because of his compliance and, just sign this warrant that says, fine, you can own this Starfleet officer.
Starfleet property, yeah.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
What is their record? How'd they get that position?
Well, Webster's 24th Century Dictionary, 5th edition, defines an android, right? Yeah. I actually didn't write down the definition. Is it a robotic?
Made to resemble a human being,
right.
An automaton.
So this is something that I was actually confused about as a kid. I didn't know the difference between a droid, a drone, a robot, an android. But I guess
didn't know.
Well, kind of. It's becoming real life.
Yeah, and androids, so is it anthropomorphic droid, right? Is probably what it stands for. So human-like in nature. So that's I like that Webster's is still around in the 24th century.
Right? I was like, it was sponsored. The dictionary. It's like, hey, could you just slip us in?
Yeah, right. It's going to be Wikipedia.
Yeah. And also it'll pop up with please donate to Data's information.
Please donate to Wikipedia though, everyone, because they don't accept any advertising and they're the one true source of non-corrupted information that we can all share, just unrelated to this episode. Go ahead and give money to Wikipedia, please.
Data's storage capacity is listed as 800 quadrillion bits. Amazon X-Ray told me that equals 100,000 terabytes. So
we're getting close.
We're getting there. Yeah. He's gonna start leveling off. It sounds
I think I got one of those. Yeah.
You got 100,000 terabyte drive, and she holds up something outside of a book.
I have my Nintendo Switch.
What if I had one of those and you pulled out an Android?
Yeah.
So
Jake, that is a sex doll.
It's an android.
Between a robot, a droid, and a sex doll. I don't.
Yeah, really.
You walk into a bar.
Consent, Jake.
Well, speaking of consent, holy shit, Riker's cross-examination.
Too far.
Oh my gosh. Well, this was a big move. And I have mixed thoughts on this. So first off, we talk about his mega strength is what we call it by, I guess, the legal definition. Lots of creatures have mega strength.
Beings have mega strength. Vulcans have mega strength, for instance.
Yeah. What was the point of that?
Because I think that they have to quantify that as an ability that other beings could have.
But what was the point of that in the trial? I mean, why show him bending?
To prove the non-humanity of him. What being could possibly bend this?
But that's what Picard said, was lots of beings have it, therefore he is a being?
Don't try too hard to find logic, because Frakes' job here, or Riker's job here, is to look like he's trying his hardest and also throw softballs.
See, that's what I was wondering, because he's not supposed to do that. Philippa specifically said, if it looks like you're throwing this, I'm just going to call it right there, and we're going to dismantle him.
Well, it was just a big advertisement for LARPing foam that's really bendable.
Yeah, there was a tight kink in that one, on the bendable one for sure.
Yeah.
So Riker takes off Data's arm without asking him. He asked the judge instead.
He apologizes.
That was a really cool effect too, with the arm moving when it was in Riker's hand, and to show him that he's made of parts and he is a summation of lots of little parts. And then he does something that I thought, human,
no less.
Yeah. But he does something that I think crosses the line a little bit, which is without notifying Data, he turns him off.
Definitely. I wrote down, it's too far, Riker. No, man,
Which
we'll turn it off.
I'm wondering, if it is too far, is that like maybe he did that intentionally to make such of too far of an argument that it would be better for Picard to counter, right? Mm-hmm. Because that was jarring for all of them to see him knock him unconscious, right? And you saw their reactions, which is like, oh, well, if you're having this reaction, you must have some type of non-apathy for him, right?
Non-apathy.
Empathy is the word I should have said.
Ooh. Well, yeah.
Double negative.
That we all feel non-apathy. No.
That's interesting, though, that there I see the etymology between those words.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's, if you also have been an audience member that's been paying attention, Data has stated, if you switch me off, am I not dying? Like, that is the same thing as you killing me. He's expressed that multiple times, including what's happening right now. If you disassemble me and download something into a computer and then put me back, you're essentially killing me. That's what's happening. So for Riker to just do that, it
necessitates a recess in court, let me tell you. And everybody's got to go to 10 forward for a drink, where we get the wisdom of Guinan. Am I saying that right? Guinan. Whoopi's character. It's just Whoopi. Which they're finally starting to use her well.
Oh, I love
a source of wisdom and sexuality and creativity and brilliance. Not sexuality in this episode. We'll get to that.
Episode, yeah.
But,
I feel like they've always used her well. Like, I feel like her placement in general is like they're pulling out the big guns when they need her, and she's used really well in each one.
Yes, but they haven't used her enough.
Yes, that's true. She's infrequently used.
Yeah, and she brings up an incredible point. I mean, Jake, you were about to say something when I jumped in. So
no, go ahead.
Well, she brings up that whole generations of people have been excused as property and allows them, but she brings it up in such a way that it's agreeing with the sentiment that, like, oh, well, yes, of course, you could just disregard beings as property, and then you don't have to feel bad for what you do to them, and they can just be written off. And then this slavery analogy is very clear to Picard, and it's just beautifully written.
It's also one of the best ways to convince somebody of something, which is to follow their line of logic, because you can't sit there and give them a fact that contradicts them, because they're probably not going to listen to you. But if you follow their line of logic and let them see the contradiction of themselves, then that is something they are open to, because they are walking that road. You're not dragging them down there. I really love how she went from disposable creatures to, just looking at him straight in the eye, and he realizes that she's talking about slavery.
Oh, wow. I forgot the term. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. Disposable creatures. Oh,
yeah. Well, and this is great too, because this whole episode, you speak of the writing, is brilliantly written, because we see different ways to argue a point. And what Guinan is doing is not just helping Picard come to a conclusion, but she's also allowing him to form the argument and be able to convince people, so he does exactly what she did for him. She's walking, or Picard learns to walk people through the argument, through their point of view as well. Yeah. So it's a double gift.
Yeah, it's great. And so he does. He walks us through Data's life a little bit. He brings Data up, and he shows Data Tasha's hologram, which I thought
everything he had packed in his quarters.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, amongst other things. That's true. And like shows that this computer, whatever you're labeling him as, collects things. He is accumulating not just knowledge, he's accumulating experiences, right? And he wants to remember those with physical objects. That's a very that's a very sentient thing to do. And when Tasha's brought up, Data mentions that he wasn't supposed to say anything, and Picard says, I think in this case she'd be okay with it. And I like that line, because I think that's true. And Data mentions that they were intimate, and every single person in the room gets a reaction shot.
Yeah.
For that.
They're like, Data. The director was like, did you hear what he said? Let's go and check in. You heard what he said,
and everyone's like, can I see that hologram for a sec? Okay. Yeah. Okay, Tasha Yar.
Is there a fast forward button? Let's slow down.
Let's not talk about the fact that she was under the influence of some crazy sexy spell in episode 1, episode 2.
Yeah, episode 2. The Naked Now, I think it was.
Ooh, that's it.
Yeah, so Picard makes some great points, and he flat out says we were founded. Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, it's right there. It's sitting right in front of us, waiting. Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
Let's bring up a hostile witness.
Yeah, that is weird that he said that.
That was like, so this is clearly trying to be the lawyer episode of the show. Like, there's always kind of something like this in a lot of shows around the 90s. They kind of like follow a trope.
It's not the last one that we'll see in this show either.
Like we get the medical examination episode, we get like the mystery whodunit episode, and now we're getting the Law and Order episode,
which was also episode number 1 with Q.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and a bunch of Game of Thrones extras in pews.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the hostile witness? Good old Bruce finally gets up on the stand, is asked to define sentience, right?
Yeah, and how do you do that? He tries, and he says intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Duh.
Which Data has. Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness. Come on. And consciousness. Mm-hmm. Dude, tell me how you define that. And I love that Picard says, cool, so you're saying I have those. So tell me, how do I have those? How does that work for me? Yeah, prove that I do. Yeah, then prove that he doesn't. It's a very scientific way to go about it.
Yep.
And the line
he's
that
dealing
resonated.
With a science officer.
Yeah. And to this science officer, he says, he asks Data, well, what does this court case mean to you? And he's like, oh, my rights, my status, my life. And then as Picard quotes that, it's like, is that not what self-awareness is? That he has these things that are in relation to himself. So he must have an idea of self. And basically, it almost comes out, I thought they were going to go here. It's like, do you like Data? Is this like a personal vendetta where you are mad because you can't figure him out?
There a little bit. He says something along those lines of like, do you like him or are you fond of him or something like that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he says,
I think that's just to show, like, do you even regard him as different than equipment, right? Do you have a personal feeling towards him in any way? Picard tops it off with comparing how Riker says, you pointed out that Data was created by a human, is therefore the byproduct of one, but we are all created by other humans, right? We're all just DNA.
Ooh. And do our parents own us? Are we their property because we're made up of their DNA?
Yeah, our children property, and that seals the deal, I think, is that's kind of the final thing.
What sealed the deal for me is the line, if we create, your dream is to make thousands of Datas, and if we do that, that will create a race of androids, and aren't we to be judged on how we treat a race?
Yes, we are.
Really powerful.
I was already ugly crying by this point, and so I just was like, every line, it was just like, yeah, and it just, ugh.
This episode had so many meaningful scenes that I didn't need a B plot and didn't even notice there wasn't one.
Right.
Like, it kept going and I kept being interested the whole time. In researching this, I also discovered that there is an extended version of this episode that has like an additional 13 or 14 minutes.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find.
It's just a testament to how beloved this character they've created is. And Brent Spiner's incredible skill as an actor, that we're all so attached to Data.
Yeah, Becca, you said in the beginning you could have watched this court scene forever. Well, I think they had more of it for sure. Let's see. The Memory Alpha says a significant amount of the original footage was cut from the episode during editing, but was restored on the Blu-ray release, which we don't have. Since we're streaming, we have the TV cut version. The extended edition features a 57-minute version of the episode. The one we watched, by the way, was, I think, 42, containing approximately 13 minutes of restored scenes and visual effects. And they have a list here of all the extra scenes that are in there. Really, like, I think I wanted to watch that version of this episode, honestly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But to your other point, too, I think the reason we had the courtroom scene with this limited amount of actors and then the others with the other actors, I think that served as the A-plot, B-plot. We've got the main action happening on the A-plot of the courtroom, and the B-plot are how everyone else is reacting and during the recess of the court and things like that. How is everybody handling the case, in a way?
Yeah, but it could feel like not enough if it were a different topic. But because we're all emotionally invested in the outcome of this court case, it totally changes the need for that B plot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Becca, I also think that lends to your idea that this should be like a bigger deal in the world of Star Trek. Like, I think Xander makes an excellent point that we can't feature other guest actor lawyers to do these roles. We want our main principal actors to do it. So that makes total sense. But like, this feels like it should be a galaxy-wide verdict that should be broadcast everywhere about this. And not only is it super important philosophically, but it's super important personally for us because we all are such big Data fans.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But that being said, we are, like halfway through the second season. And so you have to consider the longevity of this too. One of the things that is the main pull of this character is this sort of confrontation that he constantly has of other people saying you're not human and him having to prove his humanity time and again. So if we decisively now say, oh, you are sentient and you're a human, that effectively closes that argument or that storyline that we're going to look at in the future. So maybe that it wasn't the big deciding thing means that there's more to look at in the future.
That's a really good point. I just thought this was an incredible episode because I think it relates so much to the things that divide us as a culture of assuming the other is not worthy or doesn't have the agency to think for themselves and is just, a sheep android going along instead of like valuing other people's opinions and other people's worth.
Yeah,
totally agree.
It's a good way to show implicit bias as well because, if somebody comes in with an opinion that they've formed on a machine or an android or something like that, they have to be changed in their viewpoint. And nobody in that room, maybe Data not included, started out thinking of Data as a sentient being. Everyone had to be convinced, Picard included, at some point.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because the Guinan scene kind of serves to push Picard over the edge of how he can make that case. Although, like,
he personally, says, I was almost convinced myself.
Yeah, I know, right? I was like, really? After Riker did that? That got you? This episode, The Measure of a Man, was writer Melinda Snodgrass's first television credit.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think, let me see if I got this right, because there's a few things. This was actually written during the writer's strike, and they were short on scripts because of it. And she submitted it, I think, blindly. I think she was like an attorney or something and wrote like a spec script, and this one made it in.
Wow.
Yeah. She had also done some other writing.
Sense. Like the law-based episode.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it makes sense she was a lawyer. So she stayed on for, I think, later in the season and did a little bit of work as a consultant. But this was her first episode on TV, which what a great one to like start. That's
right. The name sounded familiar. I did a convention with her.
Did you really?
I did.
Amazing.
She also wrote on Wild Cards, which is another with George R.R. Martin.
Yes, I was just going to mention that. That's so funny. So you've met her before?
We've met, and she's delightful. She's an incredible person. We got to spend some time. She was a guest of honor at a sci-fi convention that we were performing at as library bards.
Wow,
oh, that's incredible.
As soon as you said the name, I was like, what?
Yeah, Melinda Snodgrass is not a name you soon forget.
Yeah, I think it was one of the Southern conventions, like Deep South Con, I think.
Very cool.
Awesome. Well, this episode was well regarded. It was nominated for the Writers Guild of America Award in the category of Best Episodic Drama. I don't think it won, but still. Producer Maurice Hurley said that this episode was stunning. That's the kind of show you want to do. It just worked great, everything about it, and it dealt with an issue in a very interesting way. I thought Whoopi's place was good in that. She is a wonderful actress.
She is.
And a lot of people say this isn't really so much a Data script as it is like a Picard script, although I don't agree with that. I think it's like a mix of both because both of them have such powerful scenes and like powerful things to talk about in their respective dialogue.
I think it's in everyone. I mean, Whoopi's scene, as you just mentioned, like it's such an ensemble and it's more about the subject and the plot. Normally is not the most important thing, and in this case it is. That's why it's so memorable.
Yeah, they made the plot really interesting, and as opposed to having to find interesting things around it, right? Like there wasn't any action. There was no space stuff. There was no really very. I don't even think there were visual effects, if I can think about it. Right. So
well, the outside the starbase and stuff, all of that was visually very cool.
Don't worry, we got effects coming up in our next episode.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, there's plenty of cool design, but there wasn't like anything flashy, and that didn't need it for us to really love this episode.
Well, where can I find some flashy episodes, Jay?
You can find it next week. Thank you, Becca. On The Dolphin. That's right. Wesley falls in love with the new leader of a war-torn planet. Wesley.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Do you want to say anything special about it?
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
Well, we should set course and
make it so.
I forgot we did this.
Engaged.
That'll do.